All right, I'm excited today. So, I just completed my fourth book in the Full Spectrum Astrology series. I didn't think there would be a fourth. It's all about asteroids. And so, I've been spending the last couple of months just with asteroids. Thousands and thousands of asteroids, doing stats on them or whatever. And that's what Laurentia, the fourth book, is going to be about. Now, among those asteroids, I uncovered some patterns, and there's some really, really interesting ones. So, today we have a cool topic. It's one of my favorites. It's the topic of sexology. When you study sex, you're not just studying male and female, you're studying power. And astrology has a lot to say about sex and gender. It's not going to tell you whether somebody's male or female or straight or gay or anything like that, but it'll tell you a whole lot about how you get along with other people, if you even know a little. Now, before I begin, let me just say that no, you cannot use astrology to predict whether the sex of a person is hetero or homo, or whether they're male or female, or cisgender or transgender and all that stuff. But I tell you, all of the labels that are running around on the internet right now for describing the various dimensions of sexuality are totally legit. And I will show you some of the asteroids that talk about this. Let's get right into it. Okay, so uh, if you want to know about physical biology, there are some asteroids that can tell you about this. Now, over the next few slides, I'll just show you the four basic categories. So we all know there's basic male and basic female. We also know that there's intersex. It used to be, what was the old word for it? Uh, the old and now politically incorrect term was hermaphrodite, right? So we don't use that anymore. We use intersex, and there is an asteroid that kind of indicates that. And then there's some people where they are kind of somewhere in the middle, and so instead of having both, they seem to have neither, as far as male or female characteristics that stand out. Now, biologically, it's not really possible. We just genetically, but as far as basic appearance, this is what your sex tells you. Now, I was actually prompted to study this on the basis of some other things, because I was trying to look at how to translate regular power dynamics, regular sex dynamics, into behaviors independent of the biology of the person. And so, astrologically, you will not see a an asteroid or anything that says this person is male. Instead, you'll see an asteroid that says this is an individual who, when they're in unknown situations, tends to assert their way first. If you throw them in the forest, they're going to say, I know what to do, and they will, walk out there, whether or not they know. If that's their inclination, very broadly speaking, then that fits the definition of the male, at least in terms of biology. Now, I want to note that biology is basically how you look to other people. This doesn't necessarily say how the person identifies inwardly. So, if you're looking at a standard male, you're looking at somebody who, in the world's eyes, is trained to do this. Now, but if you're looking at a standard female, you're looking at someone who is trained in the world's eyes to say, oh, wait a minute, I'm not going in that forest. Let me think about who went in that forest or what might be in that forest. They'll process first, and then they'll determine in action. And one of the asteroids that's most useful for indicating this is Kressida. I'll tell you how to read these shortly, but just know that Kressida and Camelia are two very strongly biology-oriented asteroids. They're actually associated with body parts as well. Okay, now intersex. Intersex is an interesting one. So Lola, let me click over to my cheat sheet here, which you can't see. I forget what Lola shows. Oh, the asteroid Lola is it describes how you interact with other people's fantasies, whatever those fantasies are, whatever turns them on. You think of the Sarah Vaughan song, of course, right? Whatever Lola wants. Well, Lola, I found, is one of the best indicators not of your intersex status. Obviously, that's really, really a low percentage of folks out there. But it often indicates your opinion of intersex status, or those who blend both masculine and female and feminine patterns of assertion in the unknown. So you've got somebody who says, you throw them in the forest and they say, I know what's out there. I'm going to go do it. Here, answer my questions while I go. And so that's a rarer thing, because you usually don't have somebody who is as both about it in general. And then you have, lastly, Gudula. We live in a very hormone-heavy world, and so when somebody shows up and says, nah, I'm not really feeling that, we tend to think it's weird. And I found that going through the first 1,000 asteroids, Gudula seems to capture that kind of impression. But Gudula itself is actually kind of it's a very mysterious asteroid. You can look it up in other places, or you can look it up in my book in May. But I don't really have time to go into it here. But the point is that if you identify as any of these biologically, then you may find that they are prominent in your chart. And again, you can't just look at somebody's chart and tell, because they may be trained one way and identify another. So you really don't know. But once you know a little about them, these asteroids will tell you a lot. Now, when you get beyond physical biology, you actually have preference. So you have somebody who's a biological male, for example. Do they prefer females? Okay, well, we don't know that. But what we are able to look at is something like prototypical behavior. So the body Lempo, I'm not sure what it is. It seems to have a high number here. I don't know if it's an asteroid or a minor planet of some other kind or whatever. But for the purposes of your deepest creative drive, someone who prefers to interact with people opposite their apparent male-female dynamic. Now that's a mouthful, but this is basically how astrology thinks of gender. Astrology is not going to say that person is gay. What astrology is going to say is when that person wants to really, really create something deeply from within, they prefer to approach people who appear to be different from how they appear. So that's what heterosexuality is. There are a couple of other asteroids that have to do with heterosexuality. I forget what it is. Again, let me go back to my cheat sheet here. What was it? Oh, Elvira. 277 Elvira also tells you something about heterosexuality, but Elvira is more about heteronormativity. Heteronormativity is just, society saying that hetero stuff is better than other stuff. And if you want to see your views of heteronormativity, then you can look at 277 Elvira as well. Now, one of the most fascinating asteroids, and the one that really got me started in sexology, was Ganymede. Ganymede is basically the gay asteroid. I hate to put this out there because I know that, the grapevine being what it is, calling Ganymede the gay asteroid is really, it puts a label on it. And that's unfortunate, because Ganymede is really not just about sex, but seriously though, it's about as close to the gay asteroid as you will get generally, until we talk about Eduarda. Eduarda is pretty seriously the real gay asteroid, and that's number 340. I'll talk about that later. But Ganymede, Dyke, and Eduarda all talk about basically a preference for your own style of apparent dynamic, right? The biological look. So it's interesting that if you see a man walking around with another man, you say he's gay, right? Well, I'm not going to say walk around, but we base it on appearances. We base homosexuality really on appearances, but we don't really base it on power dynamic, and that's going to be another chapter. But anyway, the point is that all these guys are based on how your partners are socially trained. So if you're male and you prefer females, females appear to be biologically female, and thus they will be socially trained as such. As far as their inner identification, you don't see that based on appearances. This whole category of gender is more like gender behavior. and it's based on appearances. Bisexuality, while I was going through the asteroids, I said, really, there's an asteroid called McDonalda. And who knew that McDonalda was all about sexual or creative extroversion, where you're really out there. You're just like, dude, this is where I stand. McDonalda, asteroid 991, came closest to being associated with bisexuality. If you look at McDonalda and Ganymede, you can see some stuff. And again, more on that later. I have here gray asexual, because completely asexual is again very, very rare. These would be people who, for their deepest creative drive, really prefer nobody. And there are degrees of that. You can get less and less prone towards stimulation at the hand of anybody. And so in that lessening area, you get the gray part, and then in the total absence, you get complete asexuality. The closest indication is Georgia. Georgia, among all the asteroids that I'm listing here, seem to be prominent in certain charts where people just they didn't really have a preference for anything. Now, Georgia does not make you asexual. What Georgia does is show where you don't really have a high regard for whatever your partner's orientation is. You just don't care as much. With McDonalda, you care a lot. Whether it's same or different is another matter, right? So in general, you can look at all this stuff together and you can say, well, a person's either heterosexual or not, or they're non-heterosexual. And that's actually a term. If they're non-heterosexual, they could prefer their own dynamic. They could prefer every dynamic, or they could prefer any dynamic. And that's what these other three indicate. Okay, so beyond biology, the last two categories I talked about were biology. You have the mental interaction. This is how you prefer power used on you. Now, maybe some people think, because I thought this too, where over the last decade, some of these new terms started popping up for different kinds of sexuality. So you thought we all thought people were just straight or gay, and then all of a sudden it's like, what are you talking about? Cisgender and transgender and gynophilic and all that other stuff. What is that? Okay, go back to the old trope with feminine interactions. If you had a lesbian couple and you had the butch and the femme. Well, on the one hand, they were biologically female, and this is how the classification was. They were classified as biologically female. They were classified as each liking females. But one of them preferred more power, and the other one preferred less power in terms of usage. And that even that old trope kind of contains the seed of a third dimension of sexuality, and that's the inner psychology, right? Because it goes beyond who you prefer, it goes beyond your biology, and it goes into how you prefer power be used on you, how you think about things. And this is the psychology. This isn't an exact match to what gynophilia is or androphilia is, but if you're feminine preferring, then the asteroid Rosina is one of the best interactions for you. It's drawing female camaraderie. You'll have to forgive my piled tables here. I had a lot of text and I had to break it up. But yeah, Rosina shows where in your life you are inclined to, oh, wow, look at that spelling, drawing. Oh, well, whatever. Where you draw female camaraderie. If you're feminine preferring, then basically for the purpose of your deepest creative drive, you tend to interact with feminine types. Does that mean you tend to interact with women? No, not necessarily. Feminine types. And I actually have not defined masculinity or femininity yet. I'll do that on the next slide. So we'll have to get to that. Because there's a difference between being male and being masculine, as you must know. Okay, so then we have the asteroid Veronika. It's associated with sex-focused women. It was in one of the dirtier percentages of asteroids. And so there are some asteroids that can really indicate the dirty sides of a person. And Veronika is one of these. It's associated with other really intense, lusty asteroids like Ninina and Eros and and all of those. But specifically, Veronika is associated with sex-focused women, really more towards male display. It's also associated with body parts and stuff. Then you have polysexuality. Chimaera is an unfortunate asteroid. The more I look at Chimaera, the meaner it gets. Chimaera is one of the more negative asteroids in general because it's associated with unpredictability and just shifting gears and being everywhere in terms of how you treat people. But because it's associated with being everywhere in terms of a power dynamic, Chimaera is what is it? It's I lost my train of thought there, but oh, it's because it's associated with power. It actually plays into sexual behaviors and how you prefer those behaviors get carried out with other people. And it was one of the indicators of polysexuality. I'll get to that in a second, because polysexual and pansexual, those were actually newer terms to me. I had to go on the internet and do some research in order to find out how to describe what Chimaera and Nausikaa were showing. So I don't normally use these, but I'll get back to them in a second. Nausikaa is the other way around. It's where you have no preference for masculine or feminine types. Okay, polysexuality is basically where, okay, let's go back. If you're feminine preferring, you prefer that feminine type powers be used on you. You're a standard masculine male in terms of society. If you're masculine preferring, you're a standard feminine female. But if you need both, you're like, man, I got this masculinism here, but I really need this feminism, feminine type stuff as well. You have to have both the assertion and the reception first, then you're in the realm of Chimaera. If you're like, man, I don't care, whatever, as long as they're nice, as long as they're cool, I don't really prefer one power trip over the other, then you're in the realm of Nausikaa. And this is a lot like the previous slide with McDonalda and all that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop in this recording because it's getting a little bit long. But in the next recording, I'll do the last couple of topics.